You, Les, and another week's come round. Sorry we didn't do one last week, but we say it every week. We shall endeavour to put a live stream out every Thursday and some extra shows on Fridays. A little bit of content that me and Les are going to be working on. But I'm delighted tonight to be talking with Arla Collett, and she's going to be telling us about her lifelong experiences and interactions with the hairy people and other beings. So Arla, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. So for me, I've had this whole life with the Sasquatch. Some people call him Bigfoot. I've just always called them hairy people because they are a people and they're hairy. Like, some of us are more hairy than others, but it's a term of endearment,
Yeah.
For me. My first encounter was actually at age 6. I was at my grandmother's. I was sitting in the dirt playing with some sticks and making things out of the sticks. And I heard somebody walk up, and I thought it was my grandmother. But when I looked up, it was a young male Bigfoot. I knew he was male and he looked young, and I knew he was hairy. So we just, looked at each other for a while. He was probably 10 or 15 feet, I guess, from me. And then eventually he turned around and walked back off. And at that point, I jumped up and ran in and told my granny what I'd seen. And I said, what was that, Granny? And she said to me then, what do you think it was? And so she didn't try to put anything into my mind about what I had seen. She just wanted me to think about it. And at a point, then she began to teach me about them. Uh, she had known them too. And as we get into this, there'll be a photo that is of my grandmother. And I'm excited to share my story. So this
Arla,
is awesome.
if we stay with this section for a moment, you were 6 years old, a young Sasquatch. How big do you did as a 6-year-old did you estimate this to be?
I don't know. I know he would have been bigger than me if I stood up, but I don't really have a reference for how tall he was. He wasn't huge, and I've seen them enough at different ages, to now thinking back, he might have been 5 foot, maybe, and there again, I'm just guessing because I don't know for sure, but he was young that I know.
What did you feel frightened at all, or just
Oh,
surprised?
no, no. But, I talked to everything in the woods. I had already seen so many things in my life. At the age of 4, I would dream about people and then I would meet them. And that used to just terrify my mom when I did that. My granny, not so much, but there was one instance that I remember that my mother really tried to shut me down. We were at the movie theater and we were out in the area during intermission, and I saw a guy. And so I got away from my mom and I went over to him and I said, "Hi," and I used his name. And he looked at me, and my mom went over there real quick and got my hand and started to pull me away because she knew if he asked me, "How do you know my name?" I would have told him, "I had you in a dream."
Yeah.
And so she grabbed a hold of me and pulled me away. And she told me at that point, "Don't you ever do that again." And so I didn't in front of her. But my grandmother was totally open for, me to express anything.
And is that an ability that you've carried all the way through your life?
Yeah, pretty much. I walked up to people and knew who they were, and then other times, you don't know who they are. It's just I call it I'm on a need to know basis. If I need to know something, I believe that the universe is going to give me the information that I need to know.
Before we get into a few more of these stories and your experiences throughout your life, can you, for our listeners, describe where you live and the layout of the land and what's at the back of you? Just
Are you talking about where I had my first sighting
where,
or
well, where you had your first sighting and where you are now. If it's
okay.
remote, I think they'd be interested to get an image in their minds of the location.
Well, as the crow flies, I'm probably 50 miles maybe from where I had my first encounter. And it's pretty much the same. I'm have a little more of what they call the beginning of the Comanche Mountains, but there's a lot of wooded area. If you walk out to the back, there's thousands of acres that nobody would be on. But at the same token, I'm not all that far from other people either. If you go out the front, so it's Oklahoma. A lot of people think it's flat, and it is in parts of it. But we have mountain ranges, or what we call mountain ranges, here in Oklahoma, and so we're not just flat.
No,
The Comanches are beautiful.
that's fabulous. And you'll have spent a lot of time, probably now still do, in these wooded areas.
Oh yeah. Every day I walk in the woods.
Yeah.
I may not go very far, and then I basically live in the woods. I can walk out just a few feet and I'm in trees and there's a creek, and so there's a lot of water around where I am, and where my grandmother was, and I stayed with her
Do
a
you, do you,
lot. So,
do you think running water, and I know that everything that living has to drink, but do you think running water features a lot in the cryptid sightings, in the Bigfoot and the other cryptids? Because I've noted here, uh,
mhm.
where where the reports that I'm getting, there's usually water courses.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it like, okay, what do you need to live? You've got to have water, you've got to have food. And even though we are three-dimensional now, and they are too at times, you can go to another dimension and your needs change. Water is very healing. And, I look at water as the blood of the earth mother. I mean, we cannot live without water, so we can live without food for longer than we can live without water. And our bodies are made up of a lot of
Yeah.
water. So, that's how I look at that. Um, from my experience, and that goes with others than the Sasquatch, they like being here on this earth. They actually chose to come to this earth. And I believe that they were here long before we were ever put here. And they did so because of choice, of being here. Um, People tell or will ask me, well, how do they stand the cold? Well, if you look at it logically, they've never lived in air conditioned housing or heated or used any of those things. We didn't either at one time.
And we stood
So
the cold.
if we're in that three-dimension form and they are in the three-dimension, then that's what they're going to do. They're going to live with what is in this third dimension. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't go to other dimensions. Um, and then everything changes.
Yeah, well, that's what what people call paranormal. Do you think it's just, is it just a natural gift that these creatures have, or is it the paranormal realm that they're entering in and out?
Well, for me, that word doesn't exist,
Right.
paranormal,
Well, give us the
you
word that
know.
exists for Arla.
So, but I understand what you're saying. And they choose to do what it is they do. They know exactly how to change their vibrations to be in another dimension. And I don't believe you have to have a portal to go from dimension to dimension. Um, I believe that your vibrations change. And as your vibrations change, then you change. And so it's like I'm changing my vibrations. I am no longer 3D. Okay, I'm going into 4. Well, there's going to be a big change in me. If I go to 5, there's going to be another change. So it's not like that you have to have a portal to do that. And they certainly don't. But this reminds me of a story. Um, Actually, it was something that happened. I have a teacher who is a Sasquatch, he's an ancient, and his name is Kashima. And we were walking one day in the flesh and blood. We were walking. And I had been asking him some questions about this. I think they've termed it as cloaking or whatever, where you see them and then you don't see them, or you see them and watch them fade away. And we had walked down one of the roads, and there was some wild turkey there that were getting ready to cross the road. And when they saw us, they took off. Well, we walked on, and on the way back, we had to walk through that area again, and turkeys were filtering back in. Well, like a little girl, I just said to him, "Can you hide me? Can you hide me?" And it was like, boom, those turkeys can't see me. There's one probably 15 feet or maybe a little more from us. He has no idea that we're there. Now I'm touching myself. I'm touching my arms and my face and, all this stuff going. I don't feel any different. I still feel what I would feel normally. The only difference that I noticed was that I was not connected to the earth. My feet were not standing on the ground. I was disconnected from that. It wasn't like a bad feeling or anything. So, and people say, well, how do you know that you weren't seen? Well, there's a turkey that's right there, and I'm exclaiming. And at one point I said, oh my gosh, I could pitch a rock and hit him. I could probably hit him if I spit. So, and they were not even aware that we were there. Now we looked the same. He looked the same, and I looked the same. And so we continued on, and the turkeys then kept filtering in. Well, we came back that way, and there were some turkeys there, and Kashima had what I call brought me back, which it doesn't mean that we went somewhere, but he brought me back to being connected to the earth. And he did it in steps. And I noticed that each step, the turkeys became a little more aware. And at that almost the last step, those heads went up on the turkeys. And then when I was back touching the earth, those turkeys took off flying. So they were so totally unaware that we were even there.
I don't expect you to have a detailed answer to this, but how did Kashima
Mhm.
create that effect on you? Do you know? No?
It it's just that he had the ability to change the vibrations, and as that happened, my vibrations changed. And so we walked in, it would be almost like walking into another dimension.
Right.
You know, I can't, if you walk into the fourth dimension, I'm probably not going to be able to see you, and so forth. They are so much more higher than any fourth, fifth, or sixth dimension. And so, you know, just that fact. But you know, it wasn't like I was begging him or anything else. I mean, that thought hit me, and like this little girl, I just said, "Hide me," and he did. You
How
know,
old would you have been then?
oh, I was a woman. It hadn't been that many years ago, probably 10 or 12 years, maybe something like that,
Okay.
years ago. So,
I'll just ask you a question relating to something that happened to me then. Uh, Staxton and Flixton, an area that I speak about quite often. We've got cryptid reports in that area. I say cryptid because they've not been Sasquatch related. However, I went to speak to the people who owned the Spittle Inn. Uh, it's a public house and a restaurant near this area. And the inn is built on the foundations of an ancient refuge. And what am I going to say to you? The lady, when she was telling me about the Flixton werewolf and her knowledge of this
mhm.
cryptid, she looked up into Staxton Wold and she said, "I think there's a Bigfoot up there." And I kind of took it with a pinch of salt, but I spent some time up there, Arla, on my own. Well, once I took my granddaughter with me on one occasion. And while I were up there in the daytime, no wind, I think it was 3 very loud knocks right next to me. And I'd gone in with the intent in my mind. I knew what I was thinking. I weren't for some kind of contact with something. And I sat down on a fallen tree, poured myself a drink. And I know what you're going to say when I said this. It's not going to happen for me. I put a voice recorder on and I sat there and I waited because it were right next to me. It were almost like a lump hammer of what it in tree. And and I've often thought, well, I don't know how that happened. I mean, it could have just been some freak tree banging together. We know that. And then I went in a second time with my granddaughter, same area, and we got the most vile smell of rotten eggs, sulfur. And we sort of hovered around for a bit, left the area, and then we came back. It had gone. What are your views on that?
Well, I can tell you about they're where they want to be, and it doesn't make any difference where we think that they are. You know, I know too many people who have had experiences in town with the Sasquatch. I've got a good friend, and he has them come and bang on his house, and he lives in a subdivision, and that's not the only person I've ever talked. They go where they want to. And could they have been there? Yes, very much so. Could something else have done that tree knock too? Yeah. But it's one of the things that humans have put with them that they do.
Yeah.
And so they're going to use that, in various ways. They evidently, I would say, wanted to give you that experience and to let you know that they are
Mm.
wherever they choose to be. And, it doesn't matter. I know I had talked to a man from Kansas, and they grow acres and acres. And I think this was over a section of land, which is over 600 acres of land in corn. And they're massive, massive cornfields. And he was making they have an area where they can drive through and check all the corn. And when he got to the center of that, there was this big circle cleaned out, and it was very neat. And all the corn cobs were piled neatly, not just strewn here and there, but they were piled neatly. Now, he had sightings up there, and they had dogs with them too. And so they were in the center of that corn. Some of that corn will grow 10 foot or taller. I've grown taller corn here. And so that's in a cornfield. People say, well, how in the world would they hide in a cornfield? Well, number one, if they don't want you to see them, you're not going to see them. And that's just, how that goes. It doesn't matter if they're in the desert walking across. If they don't want you to see them, you're not going to see them.
And what do you attribute the lack of evidence as in footprints to? Because I'll jump to some of the reports that we've had, and mountain bikers watching this thing pacing them as they're going down a logging road, and they said it must have been on. It were almost like it were on a sliding track.
Yeah.
Because we know there's ruts and divots, there's trees, there's stones, and this thing's just smoothly moving along. Our brilliant gamekeeper friend in the documentary we do in Wolfland, when he saw this creature move down the side of the farmhouse, he said that's what it did. He said it was like a torch beam going down, not light up. I'm just talking about no movement. So
Yeah.
how's that occurring? Is that the type of what you've been explaining when you said you felt like you were lifted off the ground?
It could be, but there again, it depends on how they're doing whatever it is, the vibration that they're in or whatever. Sometimes they do leave long trackways, and there's been many of those documented here in the United States. I've got friends that have cast them and documented those things. I've seen trackways here, and I've seen single footprints, I've seen two footprints, I've seen, so it depends on what state they're in as to whether or not they're going to leave any footprints.
And have you ever come across aggression from these things?
Never, never, ever. And I've worked with a lot of people through the years who felt like they were uh, having some aggression. Probably 99% of the time, it was caused by the person. And it wasn't actually aggression. Uh, they think different than we do. Number one, they're big and they're loud, and their vibrations can literally almost knock you off your feet if you're not prepared for it. So, they can be right there and then they're not there. You can feel that vibration and not even see them.
Yeah.
And you can hear things they do and you can't see them. I've got a son-in-law that would love to have a good sighting, a good visual. And he's so funny because he talks all the time about, well, yeah, I do. Well, I was on the road and I needed some things at my cabin put in the garage. And so I asked him, I said, will you go out there and put all that stuff in the garage for me? And he said, well, sure. Well, he called me back after a while and he even took one of his friends with him. And he said, I'm not staying out there. He said, they're everywhere out there. He said, they're pitching sticks, they're crunching. I can hear them walking and moving. I can even feel them, but I can't see them. And so he said, I'm not staying out there. So he left. So it's kind of a joke with us now. He's always like, I really want to see one, but I don't want to do it when you're not with me. So But they can do those things
Yeah.
if they want to, and most of the time it's kids.
Right. Okay.
You
So
know,
you're just
it's
like teenagers kind of thing.
oh yeah, and they've never thrown anything at me. Um, I had a pecan uh, hit my chest, so I guess that kind of was thrown at me, but it felt more like it was dropped, and I wasn't under a pecan tree for that just to drop. But growing up, I was taught about them.
Yeah.
And the things my grandmother told me were they're our neighbors. And we treat them like they're our neighbors. Sometimes we talk to our neighbors and sometimes we don't. It depends, but there's always to be respect. And if you have respect, then you don't have problems with your
Mm.
neighbors. And so that's how I grew up treating them. They were my neighbors. I knew they were there. Sometimes I might talk with them, and sometimes they were doing something, and the same with us. And, if we looked at life like that with that respect for everything, then we probably wouldn't have problems we do.
That's a good point. Yeah. And so do you think then, just like humans, that there's good, there's bad, there's mischievous, there's people who are funny. Uh, they can't all have the same temperament, surely.
Well, they don't have the same temperament, but a lot of what happens is related to the person and what they believe they are. And I'll tell a quick story. If you've ever listened to me, you've probably heard me tell this story. But I was at a gathering. We were down in the Cailleach's, and there was a young man. He was just in the military, and he was there for the weekend. And we had talked that day about them. He told me he didn't know what they were really, and he was a little afraid that they could hurt him. And so I just listened to him and told him, what I knew. And so later that evening, it was about midnight, we were all sitting around the fire, and I am prone to just get up and walk out into the woods. And I did that night, and he saw me and he said, "Miss Arla, can I go with you?" And I said, "Sure, come on." So we walked down this one lane road, and the trees were pretty thick. There were big cedars, and we began to hear bipedal footprints that were coming closer. And then we could hear them right inside the trees. And we stopped and listened. And he reached over and grabbed me on the arm and he said, "Are you afraid?" And I said, "No, I'm not afraid." And he said, I asked him, I said, "Are you afraid?" And he said, "Yes." "Are you not afraid?" "No, I'm not afraid." So I tried to talk with him, but it wasn't doing any good. So I said, "Let's just go back." So we went back to the campfire. Well, if you took a report, my report would be we were walking down the road at night. We heard bipedal footsteps. They started coming closer and closer till they were just behind some large cedars. And we stopped and listened. His would be we were walking down the road. We heard large bipedal footsteps, and it kept getting closer and closer and closer. And I didn't know what it was going to do.
Yeah, you'd have
So,
totally different mindset to yourself,
yeah.
hadn't it? And I
So you've
suppose,
got, yeah, it's
like,
the misunderstanding that we have for their nature.
and I also, I suppose, if someone came across one of these creatures and they've got a gun, they're going to get a different reaction from the creature, should we say, from the Bigfoot, to what they would get without a gun.
They're going to test you. Um, there was something that happened here at a drum making workshop years ago, And a friend of mine came, and it was totally not about the Sasquatch. This was a drum making. I figured they would all be gone and wouldn't be anywhere around. Um, but I had been off in the woods walking, and I came back up, and he was sitting there, and he walked over to me and thanked me for letting him come. And, he really didn't see anything. And I said, well, come on, let's go to the woods. Let's go walking. So he had his FLIR with him. He had been sitting there watching,
The thermal.
and yeah, and he wasn't seeing anything. Well, when we walked off, I said, you've got to turn that off now. He said, well, that I don't have to. It's quit working. So before I ever told him he had to turn it off, it quit working.
Right.
And I'll leave that to whatever you
Mm.
think happened to it. But I know they can turn those off. They can do other things if they want. So we're just walking to the woods, and we're go around the fence, and we're getting close to the tree line right there. And he stops, and he's not saying anything to me. So I just stop there with him. And then we take off again. And then we get over by the tree line, and he moves away from me. After the fact, he told me that they had mind spoke to him, what are you doing with that gun? Now, he didn't really believe in mind speak. He didn't totally discount it, but he'd never had it happen. And he said, the one thing I knew when they asked me that was I had to tell the truth. And so he began to tell them. He had worked in law enforcement and stuff, and always carried a small handgun in his cargo pocket pants. I did not know that, or I would have asked him not to carry it around with him. Not because of them, because they'll test you. And if they feel like you're not stable with that gun, they'll just stay away from you. So that night, because I believe he was very honest with them, they gave him an experience that to this day, he'll tell you that he doesn't have any fear anymore about anything, because he got to see what I call the family, which is Indigo and Indigo's younger brother, Blue, and his little sister, I call Baby Girl. And he got to see one that I called Rujusna. And then he got to see Owl Collar. Owl Collar, Rujusna first stepped out into, and that's Indigo right there that you can see in the little heart leaf thing. Rujusna had stepped out into the pathway that walked on down into the woods, and there was enough moon that we could see. It was like it was lit up, and the canopy wasn't extremely thick at the time, too. So Rujusna stepped out and started swaying. And Rick asked me, he said, he's swaying. And I said, well, just sway with him. Well, when that happens, it's like there's this calming peace energy that just floods over. And then at that point, Owl Caller stepped out and began to do an owl call. And of course, all this is Rick was allowed to record this, but he couldn't take pictures of it. And I've had a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, you set that up good, no pictures." But we've actually had a spectrogram done on that, and the owl call has a lot of strange anomalies with it. Um, we saw it, so it's not a question. But he was given that gift. I didn't ask them to do that; they chose to do it,
And
and I believe
and the
he was
pictures,
honest.
yeah. So if it's coming from it with good intent, then there's more chance of having an experience. So
Yeah.
me going to these places armed with cameras, which I do. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
I'm less likely to have an experience than somebody who's just going out there and taking in the nature.
Yeah. It's what's in your head and what's in your heart is how things happen with them. Um, I've seen them with somebody had a gun and that person said, "Oh, I'd never shoot one." But then they started being pushed with sounds and feelings and stuff like that. And they would use that gun.
Mm.
And so everything just stopped at that point. So it's not the gun, it's the person that has the gun.
Yeah,
And, that's one of the things. If we get scared enough, we don't know what we'll do at that
no,
point,
no, good
you
point.
know. So,
Okay, well, I, we'll see if Les has got any questions from the people in the live stream, and I'm sure there will be. And then we'll get to the facing the window when you were a little girl. We'll just go back in time for a while, but we'll do Les first.
okay.
Okay, yeah, thanks guys. Great show so far, and thank you everybody for joining the live stream tonight on the Truth Proof channel. I've got some questions. My first question is from Lee Roscoe. How many Sasquatch has Arla seen in her life so far, and what was her best sighting which sticks in her mind?
Gosh, I wouldn't know how to count, how many I've seen. I'm not saying, oh my gosh, I've seen hundreds or thousands or whatever. But for several years, I backpacked, hiked, and primitive camped from coast to coast and into British Columbia. I spent a lot of time going to areas where people were having encounters. I've been to research areas where people had been researching and trying to document things. So, I've seen several. Do I see them every day? No. I go back to that neighbor thing. Sometimes you see your neighbors and, sometimes you don't. Now, around here, the hairy kids is what I call them, are pranksters. Oh my gosh, they have pranked me so many times, and they're not above pranking someone that's here too, So, we had a guy working on the house. I bought my old home place back and we've been fixing it up. And he had his tape measure in his toolbox. Well, he went to get it, but it wasn't there. And he hadn't used it yet. So we looked everywhere trying to find that tape measure. He took everything out of his toolbox. We looked in the toolbox. We couldn't find it anywhere. Well, he says, "Well, I've got some more at home. I'll just get one when I get home to bring it back tomorrow." Well, when he got home, he called and he said, "When I got home and was going to put another tape in my toolbox, my tape measure was in my toolbox." you know. So uh, they're they love to prank. They really do. They like that physical, funny interaction because it doesn't take much to make a human go, "Oh my gosh," or have a funny look on your face, or "How did that happen?" And they're laughing, like a kid does.
Yeah.
If a kid, pranks you and,
And
uh,
as
or
a
you
joiner,
prank a kid, yeah,
as a
it's
joiner,
all,
I've lost my tape measure and my hammer loads of times, and it weren't Sasquatch. But I'm not saying that won't happen. I used to carry my hammer under my arm like that, and
yeah.
I'd be looking for my hammer, walking about looking for it, and it's under my arm. But no, it's
Oh,
interesting, like you said, and they're hidden in plain sight. They would have been doing that around your home, your outskirts of your property, wouldn't they?
yeah.
Yeah.
So and I tell stories all the times of stuff they do and the stuff that they still do. I mean, Indigo now is he's around like a 20-year-old. Blue is like 15 or 14 or 15 age comparison, and then baby girls. She's a little younger than that. So they do grow up, but they prank for quite
Is
a
is
while.
is there a hierarchy?
Mm,
No.
I've never ever seen a hierarchy. Hierarchy is a human thought. And one of the things, I guess, the best piece of advice Kashima ever gave me, and it holds for anything, any cryptid or anything that we are trying to understand. He said, do not put your thoughts onto us as a human, as to how we should be. And we do that with everything. What is it? Anthropomorphize. We do everything, try to see it from as a human.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're different than us. My grandmother said they're like us in ways and they're not like us in ways. And so when we try to figure something out, be it Dog Man or the Star Nation people or fairies or little people or whatever, we have to stop and think, well, I shouldn't put my thoughts of how I think they should be. I need to just step back and watch and experience and see what the reality is of it.
Yeah, good point. Les?
Yeah, a couple more questions coming in for you, Arla. MKMD Exploration and Paranormal is asking, in the presence of a Bigfoot, what was the wildlife's response? Was it like silent or noisy, calm, etc.? What was the environment like?
You'll see both. Um, Sometimes there'll be a stillness when they're around, and then other times everything's just as normal as it can be. One of the things that happens in that stillness is we pick up on the stillness and we go, oh, wait a minute, something's going on here. If everything was normal, we might not pick up on that. But if things are out of the normal for what the woods are going to be, then we're going to stop and we're going to begin, okay, now why? Why is this? And then if you have a sighting, then, you go, well, they were here. Maybe they made everything be quiet. I think it's more of this all being connected thing. Everything there in the forest understands each other.
Yeah.
They have their way of being connected. And we walked away from that. And so once we connect back into that, then it's a lot easier to understand what's going on.
When you say
I
we,
tell,
you mean the human species. We've walked away from it. We've
yeah,
stepped away from
yeah,
our roots, from being grounded, really, haven't we?
yes, we have. And we have the same abilities that people say that they have. We've just forgotten how to access those abilities. But every day now, I see more and more people who are accessing those. As a kid, I grew up uh, around several elders. And I've seen some of the native elders in my areas do things that people would say, no, that that can't happen. I mean, when I was a teenager in school, I had a car, and after school, we would all go riding up and down Main. Well, there was an old native man that lived there, and everybody said he has medicine. And so most of the kids didn't want to talk to him or be around him, but I always wanted to go ask him questions. But I knew my grandmother would not approve of me bothering him and asking him things. So on this particular day, he was at the end of Main Street and was turning to walk home. He never had a car. Everywhere he went, he walked pretty much. And so that day I said, I'm going to stop and pick him up so he doesn't have to walk all the way home. And they were like, no, no, he's got medicine. Don't pick him up. So I didn't, but we drove on out, which was several miles, towards his house. Now, that old road, you had to drive in the middle of it because it was so rough. So we drove all the way out. We didn't meet a car, and no car passed us. And when we got in front of his house, he was walking up on his porch with a sack that he had in his arms when we saw him. Now, how did he do that?
Hmm.
He remembered. He remembered how to do it. And with quantum physics now being so much in the science and mainstream now, everybody's talking about quantum physics, and what does that do? And that's very much a part of it. It's just a vibrational change, is what I believe it is.
Yes, interesting. So interesting. I don't know whether Les has got any more questions, Arla, have you?
Les, yeah, I've got a couple more, Paul, and thanks for that response there, Arla. Mark Rhodes, earlier he talked about a bad smell, Arla, on these
Hmm.
creatures. So Mark Rhodes is asking, why do they have such a bad smell, do you think?
Well, they don't smell all the time, and they do it at will. It's not something that they do. Now, they can be out doing stuff and get dirty like we do, but they don't have that smell that'll nearly take you down unless they choose to have it. Now, I I have a good friend that had come to stay with me for a couple of weeks, and we were sitting out at the cabin, and Blue, one of the hairy kids, decided to prank us, and he would have that smell. And it was like, oh my gosh. And he wasn't that far from us. It was awful. And I'd say, stop it. That's horrible. We don't want to smell that. Well, he'd wait a little while and then he'd do it again. And finally, it became a game. And several times there, he did it, and I got tickled. Jonathan was like, gosh, it was like it would gag you nearly. And so he was just being a kid. And how many other kids do things like that to make smells to make you go, oh my God, that's horrible. But that is one of the things. Now they can use it, they can get your attention in a heartbeat with it. Because if you smell it and you smell it to the max, it'll take your breath away and burn your eyes.
Well,
So,
we touched on it earlier in Staxton Wold, and I'm not saying that's what it was, Arla, but we come across the tree knocks on one occasion by
yeah.
myself. Well, I've got little dog with me, Wolfie. He'd no idea. He just doing his own thing. He always did. But the second time with my granddaughter, the smell, it 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 was it was it were all like sulphur. It were rotten eggs. It were
Mhm.
absolutely vile. But
Yeah.
we moved out of area. We went back to it. And it had gone. So
Yeah.
just strange, just strange. I mean, I can't categorically say that. Oh, we've had some kind of visitation, but interesting in view of what you're saying.
Well, you didn't get it to the max. So be thankful
Yeah,
that that's all you got, because it is a really, really awful smell.
pungent.
And if you get it enough, it'll make you leave the
Yeah.
area because it's horrible.
Okay. Right. So, have you done for questions for a moment, Les?
Might be able to slip another one in, maybe two.
Yeah.
And the thanks for the super chat tonight, guys. Lee Roscoe, always nice to us. Thank you, Lee, for that super chat. And I think we had another super chat in. Was it
Alison.
Alison Buttle? Yeah. Thank you, Alison, for that super chat as well. Right. So the question is, from Blue Shift, how many types are there, Arla?
Mm. I see a lot of things that people put out and they say, well, there's this many types and there's this many types, and these act like this and these act like that. And the thing that I found, and like I said, I've been all over the United States, and I wasn't staying in a motel. I was in a tent more than likely. out in the woods or in the areas. And, I equate it to us. And something that one of the old Cherokee language teachers talked about is they are like us in ways. And there are many types of us, even though we are all humans, we're all man, but there's many types. And a lot of times those types are in areas because they're in family areas. And so you've got that there. One of our Cherokee language teachers years ago told us that when they were removed here to Oklahoma, they all spoke exactly the same. But when they moved here and would be put in different areas over a period of time, they began to act a little different and their dialect changed. And so that's pretty much the way man is. If we're in areas, let's say you're in Peru and you're up in the mountains, you're not going to do very good if they take you down to sea level, because you've adapted to that area. And in this third dimension, that's what happens in the physical is we adapt to something, or we move to where we are more comfortable. So one of the things that I've noticed is that you do have in some areas with similarities, but then there'll be a few that maybe are not exactly like that. And who's to say that some from another area moved in to that area. So, if you're just aware and you think about things, and I tell people all the time, think logically for a little bit and then get out of your head with what you think. Because when you begin to think logically, you look at things as we understand them, like this. Are there going to be different ones in different areas? Are they different types? Are they mean in one area, or, whatever? I've heard them say, oh, a red one, they're really, really, really mean. And they're down, I guess, in the South. Well, no, there is a red one in Kentucky, and he's not mean at all. So we have to go back to that. They are who they are, like we are who we are.
Okay.
And, so that's how I see it.
Nice.
I've got
Great
one
way of
more
looking at it.
question.
Okay,
Yeah,
then.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Arla. I've got one more question at this point, and then I'll let you go forward with the show, guys. And the question is from the one who knocks. The question is, it's a big question, is this one, Arla? Are they the ones taking the people of missing 411?
No. No, I don't believe that. I talked to Dave Paulides when he was writing that book. I met him years and years ago. And he did not write that at the time he was writing it with Sasquatch in mind at all. He did it because of what was happening. There were people that were missing. There was not documentation to that. And so that he wanted to know why was this not being documented when you've got all these people that are missing. And I told him at that time, I said, you know what, I said, you'll write this book and everybody will think it's about the Bigfoot because of his prior books and what people knew about him. He was in the Bigfoot world of research. And so that's how everyone saw Dave. And then he did the book, and that's exactly what I saw people doing when it first came out. Oh, it must be the Bigfoot taking them. I don't believe that they're taking them. Number one, I've seen too many instances where they have brought people from being lost. So there's all kinds of reasons for people coming up missing, and a body doesn't stay in the wilderness intact very long. Every piece of that body is taken in one way or another in a pretty short time.
So your views are that the Sasquatch aren't taking people, which is, I've no reason to disbelieve that, or I ain't got a view either way, to be honest, Arla.
Yeah.
But what do you think is taking people, or do you just think it's unfortunate accidents or people getting lost?
Well, I really don't know, all of it. I know that there are people who get lost, and I know how easy it is to get lost out in the woods, especially if you're not familiar with that area. It's really going to be an easy thing to trip over a stone, to do all kinds of things to happen. Now, could something be taking them? I suppose it could. Could they choose to go with something? Yes, I believe that can happen too. So, you know, as to all of them, I can't say.
No.
And the reason I say the Sasquatch, I don't believe are doing it in a malicious way is because in all the years of my life, and that's a long time, many decades, I have never once seen that happen. I've talked to a lot of people and never seen that kind of something happen with him. I've talked to so many that a child comes up missing, and they look for him, and then they find the child, and the child's perfect, and the child describes, this is what it was. One of my good friends, who's Ponca, Kiowa, he had had something happened when he was a little boy, and he related it to a bear. It was a big, hairy bear that saved him. Well, Pete was taught that the Sasquatch were a dark energy and that he shouldn't have anything to do with them. So anything that he would remember would be taken out of his mind. This particular thing kept him from falling in a river. When I started working with Pete and became friends with him, we were sitting there talking one day, and he got this look on his face, and he said, "That wasn't a bear that saved me. That wasn't a bear that kept me from falling in the river. That was a foot." And that's what they call them, a foot.
Yep.
And so he released all of his thoughts that they were a dark energy because he had been uh, began having interactions with them, and they were not threatening at all. They were telling him about old medicines and things that the people had used and stopped using, and he didn't see anything dark. And when that came back to him, it helped him a lot, to realize that they saved his life at one time. And I see those stories from a lot of people. I mean, you can go look for the stories you want to find. If you want to find those that are scary and malicious and everything else, you can find them. They're out there.
Yeah.
But you can find the other stories too. And what you put in your mind creates your reality.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting. It's similar to, I heard you say that we create our own demons. We give them life. I know we're jumping from the Sasquatch, but explain that a little bit, if you like.
About what? About the demons?
Does that just sum it up, what I've just said? I think it was you that said it, weren't it? We create the demons.
Yes.
And
yeah.
we give them life.
I believe that without humans, there would be no demons on this earth. We create them and we give them life, and we can do away with them too. We don't have to create them. It's once we realize that that demon does not exist unless I give it life. If I take life from it, through my beliefs and how I think, then that demon doesn't exist anymore. It's gone.
Do you think that would? I don't think it's going to happen, Arla, but do you think that would stop bad things happening in the world? Do you think that would stop people doing bad things?
I can hope.
Yeah.
I can hope. I know for myself, I take care of what I know I'm supposed to do, and what comes in, what I watch, what I listen to, all of that factors in. People say, well, don't you watch all the YouTube videos of all this stuff that's going on? No, I don't. I don't, because I don't want to put those things in my head. And I sure don't want anything in my head about something that I have no personal experience with.
No, that's a good point.
I told people for years that if you're having a really bad thing happen, I'll be glad to go and stand with you where that's happening, because I am that assured that I will be okay.
Okay. So, Arla, on that note, I think Les is probably done with questions, and we can jump back to childhood and the face looking in at the window. And I think it was your dad that ran out. Just tell people a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was actually my first encounter, which I didn't realize I had had that encounter when I had the one that I related earlier at my grandmother's. I was 3 and I was sitting on my mom and dad's bed in their bedroom, and the window was open. My dad was taking a shower. My mom was in the closet getting clothes out for the next day. And she heard me talking to somebody. And she come out of the closet and she said, "Who are you talking to?" And I looked at the window and she looked over there and she screamed, "Arliss," which was my daddy's name, "there's a nasty, hairy man looking in the window and Arla's in here talking to him." And so daddy ran outside. He got a butcher knife and took out, but you could hear someone running away before he ever got out there. Now, I remembered this experience, but my mom said something to me one day. We were talking and she said, "Do you remember when that nasty hairy man come to the window and you was just little, and even where we lived on Elder Street, and you were talking to him and I come out and it scared me and your daddy took off with a butcher knife?" And I remembered it and she said, "It's a dirty hairy man." That was a Bigfoot. you know and I was like, "I guess it was, Mom. I guess it was." And so at the age of 3, I was talking to one, but it didn't dawn on me, when I opened up and started talking about them and my history, that that's what that was. It just, wasn't in my reference to think about that. But I thought it was funny because my mom had a hard time with it.
Yeah.
She was always afraid of everything. And of course, my grandmother didn't talk with her about it, but she never had an experience either growing up. And that was one of the things that my grandmother and I talked about, that she hadn't openly shared this. Now, family knew it. And this is my grandmother. And I believe this is probably like early 50s, and there is her representation of a Bigfoot walk. And you can barely see her face, but you can tell she's loving this. She's grinning ear to ear. And for any of you who know about the timelines on the Bigfoot, this was before the Patterson Gimlin or Jerry Cruz or any of those that had happened. So she knew enough about how they walked. And I guess my grandfather took that picture.
Yeah.
I came across that picture in some of her old ones and asked her about it. And she explained it to me, but she didn't tell me when, the date.
So these things, it's probably been doing them a disservice by saying things. The Bigfoot go back generations in your family, the knowledge of them.
They could. I know they go to my grandmother. I never asked her if they went any further back. It wasn't anything I wanted wanted to know, I guess.
Do you
But
wish you had, do you wish you had have asked her?
I do. I'd like to know, more about that. Now, I know that in my family, in her family, there were generations before her who people would call a seer. They knew things. Um, so I know that, about them. And so, I tend to believe that, yeah, they probably did too,
Yeah.
but we were taught too, you didn't openly talk about them. This wasn't just a topic of conversation at a party or anything else like it is now. We just didn't talk about them.
Which leads me to what I'm just thinking now. Are we now, 2022, are we a lot more open about talking about the Bigfoot where you live in the UK, everywhere? Do you think it's openly spoken about, and there's more of a belief that these things are real?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Even I guess what's it been, 12 years or so that I've even known about the Bigfoot research world. Um, there's been such a change, and a lot of that's due to media, TV. It's more accepting. But the interesting thing is, since it's become more acceptable, you have people that you've always known that go, well, I had a Bigfoot sighting,
Mm.
or I had an experience. And I know my boss that I had when I worked for a trucking company, we were all at the headquarters and we were going to go out to eat. Well, some of the girls and I were talking about the Bigfoot, and he's sitting there and he said, I had an experience. Everybody turned around and looked at him and said, you did? He said, yeah. And now he's in South Dakota. He said, I was out picking up hay in a field and I saw one.
Mm.
So he had never told anybody that until that moment. And I see that a lot now.
Yep.
And that's a good thing. I wrestled when I first started talking about them because I had been told that you don't talk about them. And then when I find out, well, you're going to be talking about them, I went to an elder and I asked him, I said, I know I'm supposed to do this. I'm assured of that. But how do I reconcile within myself that I might be outing them? I might be saying things I shouldn't say. And he said, you didn't out them. They have outed themselves. They have brought themselves out. If you go back to the Patterson Gimlin film, it's never been proven that that's not real. I believe it's real. I know it's real. I know Bob Gimlin, and I have no doubt there are others that are out there that are real. And, man's got past his, oh, this can't happen. I don't believe this. So this can't happen. And so many are getting past that. You still see that to an extent because there's not been a body. We don't have a body for science, and my thought on that is, okay, you want a body for science? Which one do you take? Do you take a child? Do you take a mother? Do you take a father? And that's how I feel about it when
Yeah,
someone says,
what do you think then? And we don't have to name any groups or any particular people, but there are factions that surely aren't. They're not doing any favors to this subject. just like we've got in UK, we've got researchers, and I use that word loosely because they're not researchers or even experiencers, they're just storytellers. And but we've got it all over the world. Do you think there's certain aspects of it that are really doing a disservice to the whole genre, the whole belief system in the Sasquatch?
For me, it all goes back to respect. And I've heard people say to me, you know, you're tearing down the research. You give research a bad name because you share your stories and you don't offer proof and all this. I've never once said I was offering anybody proof. I'm going to tell my experiences and my stories. You can believe me if you choose, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
It's certainly, up to you what you believe. So they're doing a disservice to so many things, in my opinion. I've got a friend who was a part of kind of like a SWAT team that hunted them, wanted to take a body, and they were expert shots. And I've heard other people say this too. They were in an area and he put his sight on one and it was looking towards him. And what he saw, he put his rifle down. He said, I can't do this. I can't do this. But there are still people out there actively trying to take a body. So there again I go. To me, that's the highest form of disrespect to anything.
Yeah.
To take a body to prove something that indigenous people around the world have stories of for forever.
Yeah.
And I think as Ron Moorhead said, there is enough soft evidence on the Bigfoot to prove in a court of law that he exists.
Yeah, well, that's
Now,
and I think he would be right as well. And you touched on Ron Moorhead. Hopefully, next few weeks we're going to have Ron on here, sharing some of his views and accounts.
That's going to be good. That's going to be good.
So I'm glad you mentioned him. Not jumping away from Bigfoot, but I've also heard you talk about information downloads.
Mm-hmm.
People having information downloads at various times in their life, and sometimes not even knowing they've had them until another period in their life, and when that information becomes relevant and useful.
Yes.
Could you just explain a little bit, please?
Well, it's like that information that we're given. It can be given in different ways. It can be given while you're asleep. It can be given while you're driving down the road. You're in your car, you're zoned out, and then you go, whoa, wait a minute. How did I get here? I don't even remember driving past this and this and this that I know is there. And now I'm past it. How did that happen? Well, those are times when you can receive information. And it's happening more and more. People will be approaching a subject and a question's asked and they'll have the answer. And they're like, wait a minute, how did I know the answer to that? Because at some point it was given to you. Now, I do also believe in past life memories of things that we've done, but that usually comes in a different way when we remember those things. So, downloads are information that we will need at some point. Occasionally, what you get, you will need very quickly. Other times, it may be quite a while. I know the ancestor grandmothers told me that we have all the answers within us. All we're waiting for is the question. And so that tells me that we are getting those downloads and those information And it comes from the collective consciousness.
So that was my next question. Where's it coming from? You know, so
yeah, it comes from that collective consciousness that is growing day by day. I see it all the time, and you know, it so outweighs all the negative stuff that's going on. And connecting with your heart, you know, there are a lot that talk about brain and heart coherence. When you connect that brain to the heart, then the answers that you're going to get or what you're going to see are so much higher vibration. You know, and now they, several years ago, they found that the heart actually has brain cells.
yeah,
They're like its own brain cells. So it's not just the brain that's ruling us. And I believe that all of these things that we are getting that change vibrations come from the heart. They don't come from the brain. The brain helps our body to work, helps this physical body work. And then when that brain connects to the heart, it brings in that soul aspect, that spiritual aspect to make everything one cohesive being, so that what we're doing is done in a much different way. It's not so much about I can do this or I can have this, or it's not about that I, which is the only letter in ego that we don't see, the I, because it's right there with it. And it's wonderful for me to see that, and especially on Facebook now, because boy, Facebook was a hard place for a long time. Has it changed? Yeah, I believe it's changed. But like I said earlier, what you go looking for is what you're going to find. And that's what I look for.
and that's
I
true.
look for those things.
And you've said, how did you put it? The body is made from the earth,
Yes.
but the soul is not from the earth.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
where's the soul from, in your opinion?
The soul is from that universal consciousness. Kashima calls it the primal seed. That is at the beginning of your soul purpose. This seed is planted wherever it is it needs to go at that time. But the soul is not physical. The soul is represented physically by the body. And science tells us that the body is made up of what's here on earth.
Yeah.
But the soul isn't. It's not a tangible physical thing as we know something tangible and physical. It's more. It's that aspect of us that's eternal. It has no beginning and no end other than that primal seed that brings it into life to live in a physical way.
Okay, thank you. And I'll not get to questions just yet, because there's still a few things I want to ask you about. And the stone people. Can you tell us about the stone people, please?
Well, the stone people hold all the cellular memory from the beginning of the earth. They and the water, which is the lifeblood, were first. And so everything that came after that, those stones through the eons have collected the memory. And so when we began to work with stones, and that's like huge now, crystals and different kinds of stones with each's property that they have, and you work with them, and they emit information, they emit energy. They're not just this stone that's there in stasis. It's vibrating all the time and it's sending out that energy. And people and the stones have said this is the energy of this stone. I don't know if you can see, it's a crystal, amethyst crystal cathedral. I call her Grandmother Amethyst because she has the energy that feels like a grandmother to me, very loving and protective and helping in so many ways. And so as we're connecting to these stones, we're gaining information, kind of like the Akashic records. The Akashic records, are the records of our soul's existence. And the physical existence of our earth is embodied in the stones. And the stones, some stay the same and some change through the eons.
It's interesting. I'll not say exactly where it is, but there's a place close to us in Hornsey, but I'll not say the actual location, where a fisherman claimed to be having communication with some large stones.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinated me and Steve Ashbridge for years, trying to find, not because we want communication with the stones, trying to find the exact location. We know roughly where it is, and we've put the word out to a few people in the area, and this guy did exist, and I believe he's passed away now. And yeah, I mean, would it be an audible communication, or are you saying that memories and imprints of life are in the stones, or surely there can't be a thinking thing, the stone, can it?
For me, they're sentient.
Right. Okay.
I believe everything is sentient too. And, we get carried away with what does that word mean exactly? Well, on a human's term, it means one thing, but probably if you asked a stone, they might tell you something different. Or if you ask a fairy or anything, a little people or dogman or anything, it may mean something different to them. I talk to stones all the time, but then I talk to everything. There are so many healers out there who have crystal skulls now that have come from places. And there's this energy exchange between stones and humans because we're waking up to remember they were here before we were. And they've kept all that knowledge, and that knowledge is right there for our access now.
Yeah, but I've took in what you've said, honestly, about while it's in my head, I'd just like to say for Saturday, happy birthday to Pat Adams-Wright, who's usually in our chat, and she messaged me earlier to say that she'd got no internet. So happy birthday, Pat, when you do finally get to watch this. And there's so many good people in chat, and it's great receiving all these questions. You touched on the dog man.
Mm-hmm.
What's your knowledge of that? And I mean, in the UK, particularly for what me and Les have been doing, Wolflands, the people that we've interviewed and seen have spoke about this, what I think is probably the same as a werewolf. What is your knowledge of the dog man?
Well, I don't have extensive knowledge of them. I do have my own experiences with them. And from what I've seen, I don't see a lot of what other people are saying. There is a male here who is here from time to time. I call him Rouse. And I've seen him. The first time I saw him, he was probably 15 feet from me. I do have a photo. I have shared it with people who do dog man research. But he also has a daughter. And I have a photo of his daughter too. I call her Weirta. And there are other people who have been here that have seen her as well. I don't feel any negative anything from them. And I've been in other places. I've been in Ohio and Kentucky and some other places where they are supposed to be quite prevalent. I still never felt uh, threatened or, anything else by them. The one thing I can say is they have what I call gut energy. When they are close, it it will twist your gut, which is where your fight or flight feeling comes from. And that's very much their feeling when they're around close. Rouse, from time to time, I was living in a tent here on the land because I chose to. And he would be around some. When he would be around, my stomach would tighten. And I would just tell him, would you please ease off a little bit? I'm not comfortable with that feeling. And that's what I tell people. When you go out and you come across something that you don't understand and it makes you afraid, you get a feeling, uh, introduce yourself, tell them who you are, tell them why you're there. That's the respectful thing to do. If you are out there where they are all the time, plus it helps you, you're talking to something and it helps to calm you down, and then try to be able to understand, what's going on. The thing with the cryptids, what they call cryptids, they don't look like us, really. Most of them don't have very many similarities to what we look like at all. So it's like anything. I don't know what you are. So do I think you're bad or do I think you're good? Well, my first view is I just don't know you, but I would like to know you. So I'm going to tell you who I am and what I'm doing here. And I tell people, I said, if that doesn't help you get past that fear that something's going to happen, it's real simple. Turn around and leave.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. Don't continue to push.
But you wouldn't put that thought process, or you might do, I don't know, to a bear, would you? Because
No, because I know what a bear is. I already know what a
so what makes the dog man different? The werewolf, the dog man, the Sasquatch, what makes them different? Is it the actual thought process that you can actually communicate where you couldn't communicate without pepper spray or a loud bang to a bear and it goes, let's run?
a lot of it is just not allowing yourself to make them something that you don't know that they are. And like I said, they don't look, and a dog man has some human qualities about them, but they they don't look exactly like us. Now, what have our stories been throughout history about something that looks like them? They've been evil monsters. They've done this. Uh, Look at Little Red Riding Hood, a children's story. What does it do? It makes you afraid of being out in the woods because the big bad wolf is out there.
So you don't think that story could have come about because there's a grain of truth in that?
That I can't say. All I can tell people is what I've experienced, and I'm not going to negate anybody's experience.
No. It's,
You know,
you're saying
so
you see it, Arla, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
yeah,
that's all you can do, as you say. But
yeah.
from our experience, whilst interviewing the people who've come to us for Wolflands, it's all been fear.
Yeah.
And we've not put that fear onto people. These are people who've had no experience of what they've had presented in front of them. I know you said, just explain who you are, and which all sounds good. And I think that is exactly what you do and exactly what you'd tell someone if they were with you in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Joe Public probably wouldn't explain
No,
who he was.
no.
You'd be freaked out, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
You know,
And I totally understand that. Fear does not come from something, it comes from within us about what we think that something is.
yeah, which is what you've just said. We've had that image and that
Yep.
put on us for years and years, which is,
Yep.
yeah, a good point. Yeah,
And then again, we're dealing with energies here too.
yeah,
But one of the things that the dog man can teach us to the nth degree is about fear and looking at our fears and understanding them. I believe that the cryptids are here in so many forms to help us humans to grow and get past some of our human feelings that don't do us justice as a higher vibrational being. You're not going to carry fear into the fourth dimension when the vibrations change. You're surely not going to carry it into the fifth dimension. And in this third dimension that we're in, we are facing so much fear now of so many things. And it's things that we totally don't understand. And so we project that fear, which is in everybody's face every day, unless you choose to try to understand what that fear is and where that fear came from.
okay. And so, why do you think we're seeing them more now? I know we touched on it earlier, but just with a little bit different emphasis. Why are we seeing them more? Is it because there's more of a belief system that it's real, which is what I said earlier, or is it because what you said, they're choosing to show themselves? But if they're choosing to show themselves, why? Because surely they're putting themselves in a vulnerable position.
Well, it's both actually. We are as a human, we are more ready to embrace other things that have always been outside the box. So you can't believe in that. That's a lie. That's the devil. That's a demon. That's all of these things. And so man has already put that on to things that are different. We even do it to people who are different than we are. Maybe a different nationality or even live in a different part of the United States. We put that on them as being different than we are, so we don't trust them. And so we go into the woods looking for these things that are out there that have the ability to help us get past that fear. I don't know how many people that I've talked to through the years that were so fearful of the Bigfoot, but they began to change how they thought and how they did things. And they came to the understanding that so much of what they feared, they created themselves.
I see, yeah.
And, I can't tell people, don't be afraid. They're not going to hurt you. I can say that from my experience. Don't be afraid. I don't believe they're going to hurt you. And that's like I said, I would go anywhere, whether it was dog man or whatever, and I will stand between them and the person. I'm that assured that I'm not going to be hurt.
Okay.
Now, could I be wrong? I don't think so. But I look at it as what I look for is what I find.
Okay, Arla, thank you. And we'll just go back to Les because we've got 20 minutes left and it's kind of flown. It's over an hour and a half already. So, any questions, Les, please?
Yeah, sure. Great show so far, and thank you very much, Arla, for coming on to the show. I've got a question from Stargazer Eternal One. Does Arla think there is a link between the hairy folk and UFOs?
That's probably the question I get asked the most. And I believe there's a connection to everything. I believe that the Star Nation people are here to help us. And I know for certain that the Bigfoot people are here to help us. Um, and there are tribal stories from indigenous people as to why the Bigfoot come to us. You know, why are they coming to us? They're coming to help us come back to respect of the earth, respect of the air, the water, respect of each other, and respect for ourselves. So many people have no respect for themselves. And Kashima said, if we have respect for ourselves, we'll not disrespect anything else. they, I believe that Kashima and his people came from the stars. He told me that they came from a place called Shamuna, which means the place of two moons, and that they came here after the earth was created. And the Star Nation people have worked through the years with them to help the earth, to help us. But because of our misunderstandings, um, we got into fear again. I think, like with the abductions and things with the Star Nation people, they've watched us for so long and kept up with our progress as a physical being, as a spiritual being. And I believe that they're there to help us. And I believe right now is a very important time. You see, so many people are getting information from them about things that we need to do and we need to see uh, to make this earth a better place. So, yeah, they are connected, but then, you know, in my belief system, everything's connected. We're connected to each other, we're connected to the trees, to the water, to all the animals, to everything else. There's no separation from any of us except in our human mind.
So if they're here to, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but if they're here to impart this information, why are they only sharing it with Arla? And there's nothing wrong with sharing it with Arla, by the way, but as compared to the populace, a small group of people, and the word's not getting out. Couldn't they do that in a more visual stroke vocal way, or does it have to be done this way?
Well, the world is changed when you change yourself. When you get past all of your humanness and change yourself for the better, that affects everything around you. I said, if I only reach one person in my lifetime of doing what it is I believe I'm supposed to do, then I've done something. I've helped. And if the only person that I've helped is myself, then that reaches out that energy and shares it with the universe. And that's what we do. Everything we are is shared. Every thought, every feeling goes out in energy waves and is shared with everyone, like in the collective consciousness. And the more people that are doing that, the better chances are that that will continue to grow. So, you know, and that's what I'm trying to do. I plant the seeds. I don't know if they'll grow, but that doesn't negate me planting the seeds that I know I'm supposed. You know, I plant a garden. I plant those seeds. I talk to them. I pray over them. I sing and I bless them. And then it's up to them and the other natural things of our world if they grow.
Yeah, thank you.
But if I don't plant them, they won't grow. So,
yeah, it's a good point.
so all I'm trying to do is to help in the best way that I know. Now I do know there are so many people now that are communicating with them. It's just mushroomed so much all around the world. You know, I talk to people all around the earth that are different thoughts and everything else, but it's that same understanding that these are things we as a human need to remember. So it's not like they're trying to teach us anything. They're trying to help us remember who we are
Right. Thank
and
you.
why we're here.
And we'll move on because we're getting through these questions if possible, because Les will get into trouble for not reading them out otherwise, Arla. Thank you. Go on, Les.
Yes, yeah, thank you for that response there, Arla. And yes, you're right, Paul. My name will be Mud if I don't get through
Okay,
some of
we'll
these.
hurry.
Okay, so I'm going to start this one with, let's have a look. Stargazer Eternal 1. No, I think I've read
Any
that
day
one.
now, Les. Just it's as weird question.
Okay, so let's have a look then. Here we go. Insert Pie now. Okay. He's asking, do you think they are flesh and blood and in no way supernatural?
No, they are flesh and blood and more. And we are too. We are flesh and blood and more. It depends on the dimension you're in as to what form you take. You know, I've experienced so many things in my life with them that people say flesh and blood can't do that. Um, but I've seen humans do things that people say, you know, if you're flesh and blood, you can't do that. So, yeah, they are flesh and blood, but they're more.
Thank you. Great answer.
Okay, thank you for that. And let's have a look. Right then, from Insert Pie now. Has Arla ever spoken to any, I don't know if my pronunciation is going to be correct here, Arla, is it the Choctaw Native Indians?
The Choctaw Indians?
Yeah, so,
C-H-O-C, yeah, Choctaw,
yeah.
yes.
So has Arla ever spoke, have you ever spoken to these about the folklore mythology of these creatures?
The Choctaw mythology? Well, in all indigenous mythology, there are pieces of truth and things that need to be brought out of it. I know many, many Choctaw people, and have been active in the Choctaw Nation area of Oklahoma. I live very close to that. I know their stories of different things, but you know, depending on who you talk to, stories will be a little different about them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll move on to the next one on my list, which is Michael Adams. Arla, do you think the foot are a supernatural creature or flesh and blood? Have I asked that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've asked that one. Barry Crump. That's a question for you. I'm trying to find the ones for Arla. I don't think I've got any more in here at the moment.
Let's just have this. Barry.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I had a double question there from two different people of the same question. I know. Yeah. Okay. So I've got nothing else on my list, I don't think.
No, I want to hear this Barry Crump question because he had a lot to say for himself in questions a few weeks ago. Unless you don't want to read it.
Well, it's Barry Crump is asking Paul, how many werewolves and lights in the sky have you witnessed this week?
Yeah, I knew it would be something stupid like that. See.
Well, I've seen lights in the sky, but I don't believe I've seen a werewolf this week. But you know, you see what you see.
Well, if these people realise the amount of hours that you go out trying to experience things, and they're not sat in an armchair, you know, making up questions, then you know, and when you go out there, you see nothing bulk of the time. After this live stream, I'm off to Danes Dyke to meet Andrew Collins and a group of people. And chances are we'll not experience anything. That's the answer to that one, Mr. Crump. Yeah. So, any more questions, Les?
You know, it's a valid question, actually. And, you know, my answer is I've seen some lights in the sky, but I hadn't seen any werewolves this week.
No.
So, you know, but I didn't, you know, it's just, it's life. And I experience it as it comes. I'm not going to make anything happen. I'm going to live my life in the flow, and what I've given, I'll be thankful for. And for the rest of it, I'm just thankful for life and what a wonderful time we live in now.
Yeah, I would agree. And have you done with questions,
yeah,
Les?
I might just be able to fit a bit of housekeeping in here. Arla, you do have a book on the Amazon.com website.
Yeah.
I'll put a link to that book in the show's description tonight.
And
but if you can tell people a little bit about the book,
okay,
that might help.
them too for people. They can get on 3 million. I'm on Facebook. I have a public group or a public page called Naturally Arla. And it's where things that I put together, I guess you'd call it my store, and my books are there. You know, you can also message me on Facebook, you know, Arla Cailleach. There's Cailleach is the middle, but you can find me on Facebook. I answer questions, you know, for people as I can. I'm very transparent, and I don't shy away from any question. You know, it doesn't matter to me. It's like we said earlier, if I have the answer, I'll tell you what it is from my perspective. And if I don't, I'll tell you I don't know. So.
And Paul, everybody can see the website name on the stream tonight, but can you tell people what they can do when they go to that website?
Well, we love to hear other people's UFO reports, cryptid sightings, anything that you want to share with us. Obviously, I've said before, if you want your name omitting, we'll do that. But the reports that are on the truthproof.uk website, they're all original first-hand accounts. So they're a good source of information, more so for UK than overseas. And obviously, you can get the paperback books, the Truth-Proof books, from the website. And if you want the Kindles, go on to Amazon. And that's about all I can say, really.
Okay, well, I'll leave the last 5, 6, 7 minutes with you two.
Well, I am interested in, you said you see lights and other anomalies around your property, probably in the woods. What's your take on the UFOs? Is it normally light anomalies that you see, or have you seen anything structured?
Yes, I've seen some ships. You know, through the years, I've watched what I would call them moving in specific symbols and things. I've talked with different Star Nation people. I talked with the Arcturians several years ago for a while. So I do have communication with them as well. And they're very active right now with trying to help us. And people in record numbers are being able now to talk about that. And, you know, like on your website, people can come and talk about what they've seen. And I think that's really important that people have places to go to talk to tell their story. Because either they tell it anonymously because they don't want to be ridiculed, or they need to just say, this is who I am and these are the experiences, you know, I'm having. So that's very important right now.
So if they're actively trying to help us, and obviously they've got superior ability to move about and appear at will and disappear, why is it so covert? If they're actually trying to help us and they've got this superior technology, we'll say, is it technology? why aren't they just helping us, or why are they just imparting the knowledge on people? Are they wanting us to help ourselves?
Well, no, they don't want this world for themselves at all.
No. Are they wanting us to help ourselves?
Well, you know, how many people on this earth are ready to talk to the Star Nation people? How many people are going to listen if they're spoken to? In anything that we do, the person that the information is going to be given to has to be willing to listen, and then has to be willing to share it. Not everybody shares. I know so many people who've had experiences of different kinds that they don't share that. They just don't go out and share that for whatever reason. For me, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Have I faced ridicule? Oh, yeah. I've faced threats on my life. I've faced a lot of stuff through the years, but it doesn't matter. I'm doing what I know I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that's all I know.
And Arla, where you live, I mean, obviously we don't need to know exact location, but what about your neighbours, or even if they're a good distance away, are they experiencing similar things?
In this area, there's a lot of things that go on. And I talk to people, my doctor. I go to my doctor. The first thing he asks me, what's going on in the Bigfoot world? Not how are you doing? Why are you here, Arla? But what's going on in the Bigfoot world? It's because he accepts that it's out there. Now, do his and my beliefs, are they the same? Not exactly, but he's open to talk about it. And it's pretty much talked about everywhere. I was walking one day down in an area where these people would come on the weekends. They have a home, and I was walking, and the woman was walking, and we just started talking. And she said, "Do you know if there are any Bigfoot in this area?" And I just said, "I believe there probably are." And she said, "Well, my sons have been having these experiences, and we were watching TV, and they think it's Bigfoot. I wonder if it could be." And I just answered her, "I believe you're probably right. I think it could be."
Yeah.
And left it at that. So that's just a chance meeting with
I was just
someone.
going to say that. You don't think she knew that you'd got this vested interest in? No.
She didn't know who I was. I mean, she didn't live in this area. She was only down here maybe 4 or 5 weekends a year in the summer. And so, no, she had no idea who I was at that point. So, yeah, and how many decals do you see on cars? I don't know how the UK is, but here in Oklahoma, there's decals on cars of Sasquatch and things that say, "I believe," and he doesn't believe in you either, and all kinds of things.
Well,
So it's everywhere.
we've got a guy here in UK, tongue in cheek, Andy Ramsden, if he listens to this, and any sticker, UFOs, Bigfoots, it'll go on his car. He just and if he goes to a conference, he'll spend all his money, books and everything. Andy is a great guy, by the way. So, I'm only having a little bit of a laugh with him. Just look, we've got about 3 minutes left here, and I think we've probably covered everything, Arla. But just briefly, what do these things eat?
What they want to eat?
Because are they omnivorous?
They eat plants. They eat meat in the third dimension. When you go to another dimension, bodies don't need what they need here in the third dimension. Okay. So they brought me healing plants and things from time to time. I didn't know that slippery elm bark was a carbohydrate until they brought me some. And I began to look it up. So they eat pretty much what they choose to eat.
Probably we should have asked that one a lot earlier into the show, but I think, Arla, it's been 2 hours has absolutely flown. I haven't had to say much. because, you know, as you said, you like talking about the subject, you're passionate.
I do.
For me, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I think Les would probably echo the same, and I hope our listeners think that also. So on that note, I'm going to say good night from Truth Proof.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, well, thank you, Arla, for being the guest tonight on the Truth Proof live stream, and thank you, Paul Sinclair, for hosting the show as well.
Thanks, Les.
Right then, so, okay, so I'm just going to wrap up, and I've got to say thank you to a very, very knowledgeable live stream audience who do ask intelligent questions. We had some great questions tonight from for Arla, and yeah, it was absolutely great. Fascinating is the word I'd use. So
Well,
on
thank
that
you.
note, yeah, on that note, if you want to get in touch with Arla, as she mentioned earlier in the show, you can. She's quite receptive on Facebook, and she does have a book for sale as well. And as you all know, you know where to contact Paul on the Truth Proof website as well. We are planning on a guest for next week, also from the US of A, East Coast. So let's look forward to that. And I've got to thank you both again. So it's from the Truth Proof team, Paul, Les, and our guest tonight, Arla. I've got to say good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Good night.